The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So Ron Rivera is telling everybody yesterday that they should feel good because they're developing a young quarterback. Well, are they? And how well are they developing this quarterback? And what's the ceiling for this quarterback? And for the 10 games that remain in Ron Rivera's Washington coaching career, what are we going to see? Are we going to see the development of this guy? Because that's all that's left. Winning? Forget it. Yeah, they're still in the mix, and Minnesota won last night, so they still think they're in the mix, but they're way at the bottom of the mix, and it's not going to get a whole lot better with what they've got on the schedule. We'll talk about that. And I would guess that you'd have to be over the age of 60 for this to have any meaning for you, but the Texas Rangers are in the World Series. They've been there before, but they've never won a World Series, and they have the longest drought of any team that's never won a World Series. Now, the Cleveland Indians won one in 1948 and haven't won one since, but the former Washington Senators, the expansion Senators, the team of my youth that was ripped away in 1971 to become the Texas Rangers, they've never won one. So that puts them in that category. 62 years without a championship. And they have been there before, went back-to-back, as a matter of fact, 2010, 2011. We'll see if the third time is the charm. And depends on who they play, I guess, how much you get excited about this. I would imagine that the baseball world is rooting for Philadelphia to beat Arizona tonight, that they would much rather have an East Coast team with maybe a few more eyeballs on the set than a team from Arizona and a team from Texas, because you pretty much lose the East Coast, and for that matter, the West Coast there. I don't think Arizona is really considered to be a West Coast team in the way Los Angeles and San Francisco are. So you'd have like these kind of outposts playing for the World Series, but the numbers tell you that it really doesn't matter that much, and we'll unpack all this stuff as we go through the morning here. We're going till noon, by the way. Tony's off today, as he usually is on Tuesdays. But this came out yesterday from Andrew Marchand of the New York Post about ESPN's ability to dump baseball, not after next season, but after the following season, the 2025 season. They are paying $550 million a season, $100 million of which is allocated for the playoffs. And their contract says that they could choose to enact this clause that they have to just dump it. Now, who's watching? Not many. They have Sunday Night Baseball. They have the Home Run Derby and the Wild Card Series. The Derby averaged 6 million viewers, and that included all their platforms, the streaming and everything else. The Wild Card ratings, now true, they were all sweeps, 2-0 sweeps, but they had 2.2 million people. 2.2 million for postseason baseball. And the ratings for Sunday Night Baseball are down a couple of percentage points, about 1.5 million, and some of the time they're going up against Sunday Night Football. So, it's just not, it's just kind of an afterthought. Carl Ravage, Eduardo Perez, David Cohn, Buster Olney, they all do a good job. But the fact of the matter is people aren't watching baseball on television anymore. And in many ways, they can blame themselves. Until this year, they had a plotting product, easy for me to say. And it was just too long, too much time to invest in. Nothing was happening. Everybody was either striking out or hitting home runs, and there just wasn't any action. So they've beefed things up a little bit. It's going to take a little time for it to catch on, but I don't know if they're ever going to recapture the interest that they used to have, because football owns the television, and they can put a meaningless preseason game on against any baseball game, including an all-star game or even a home run derby or anything that baseball has to offer, and they crush it. They just crush it. I mean, the All-Star game got destroyed in the ratings, wasn't head-to-head, but the numbers showed that the Hall of Fame football game, which is just a joke, it's the first of the exhibition games, so nobody's playing in it, and that's drawing more people than the All-Star game. And the World Series, maybe you're getting close to 9 million people, but, it's just dwarfed by other sports. Even the NBA is doing better than baseball. So whether this, helps them or not to have Philadelphia in, I would be more interested in that. And it's mainly because of the connections to the Nationals, that the top 3 batters for Philadelphia are all former Nationals: Kyle Schwarber, Trey Turner, and, of course, Bryce Harper. And so I have more interest in them than the other team. But we got plenty of interest for Texas, not just for me, for my personal, because of their connection to the old Washington Senators, but Max Scherzer, kind of got them there last night. He didn't win the game, and only threw 44 pitches, and was not that good. He went 2 2/3, gave up 4 hits, 2 runs, 2 walks on those 44 pitches. Matter of fact, he was handed this 3-0 lead in the first inning as Texas got their early 3 runs. And so Scherzer takes the mound, and I'm thinking, this can go one of 2 ways. Max is going to be great here. He's going to go like 7 innings, maybe give up 1 run, or it could be disastrous. The first pitch he throws to Jose Altuve hits it so hard that it breaks the scoreboard. It's like, something out of The Natural where, Robert Redford's hitting fly balls and smashing the camera of a guy taking pictures. It was like, whoa! And he did give up 1 run in that inning, but I'd say overall did fairly well there. Did give up a home run later on. And, the 2 runs getting out of there in the 3rd inning, I guess you couldn't really have expected a whole lot more from him. But he is an emotional guy. He's a guy who's been there before. And the shots that they were taking, I don't know how much you watched of this, but the shots that they had of him in the dugout with his hat off, he looked like he was crazed. His competitiveness has got to spill over for the rest of the team. Now, I don't know how they're going to use him the rest of the way, given that his last 2 outings after missing more than a month with a shoulder injury were not very good. But just his intensity, I think, adds something to the Rangers as they head to the World Series. And this was Scherzer on after the game with the Fox crew, which was Kevin Burkhardt, Derek Jeter, Alex Rodriguez, and David Ortiz. And if that wasn't enough people, Scherzer showed up for the post-game interview, schlepping along 3 of his kids. So here is that from last night as he chatted with the Fox crew after the Rangers' big win. And by the way, what a win. They got 20 runs in their last 2 games, 11-4 last night. Scherzer and family with the Fox crew.
Max, introduce the kids here.
Yeah, this is Brooke. She's the oldest. She's about to be 6.
Oh,
and
wow.
But she'll tell you 5.5. And then this is Casey. She's 4. And Derek is 2. And then we got the baby at home. So, yeah, it's a crazy family.
Oh, my gosh. There we go.
Yeah, she's 8 months.
And now you have a new babysitter, Big Poppy. There you go. It's perfect. Does it ever get old for you? We were on the pregame show talking about, it's the 8th time you've been in a winter go-home game. You certainly have been here before. Is it ever get old?
No, it never gets old. But, I was a little bit more composed because of all the different times I've been in these situations. I knew what to expect. I wasn't, when I was in the jam in the first inning, I wasn't rattled. I was like, okay, just, stay within yourself and execute pitches. So, I felt like mentally I was able to handle it much better tonight.
After the long layoff, right? It's been 5 weeks between starts,
right.
And you go out there in Game 3 and you throw the ball, probably not like how you wanted to. But how much did that help you coming into this game?
Yeah, I actually thought I threw the ball actually pretty well in Game 3. I just didn't get the results. We're a pitch away from really getting some good results, and kind of felt the same way tonight. You're a pitch away. I wasn't gonna shake. Abreu gets that ball down the line, but I was like, that's a 2-hopper. Nothing's wrong.
Right.
Keep executing pitches. And for me, that's all that matters. And then Boch makes a call, and that's why we won, because everybody steps up on this team.
Max, that's a great hitting team over there.
Yeah.
And how much did you appreciate before you throw a pitch? You're up 3-0. I thought the ball was coming out of your hand beautifully hot, good cutter.
Yeah, to get 3 runs immediately, it just gives you some breathing room. Mm-hmm. Especially how that first inning unfolds. That would have been a lot more intense with no runs. But with 3 runs, you can navigate. You can still be aggressive. And so, that offense, the way they can go on anybody at any time. So, we got a great team.
Marty, I got to ask you, I keep on telling the guys, you are the type of pitcher that you always want the ball.
Yes.
You're the type of guy that when this moment shows up, you always want to pull the best out of it. You want to fight for your team. But what I was concerned is that 5 weeks, just like that I asked you before, about how you feel, about how you go about the business, because we battled a lot before. And I know Max Scherzer. I know that Max Scherzer, that when he's in the mound, he's a giant. So I would like to know how you feel, especially moving forward now that you guys going to the World Series.
Yeah, I feel good. My arms are actually in a good spot. I'm not dealing with the strain anymore. I got actually a little cut on my thumb that I'm actually dealing with. That's actually more of a problem right now. But no, like you said, yeah, you got to want the ball in these situations. When the time rises and its pressure's on, all the chips are on the table. You got to want to be out there, and you got to want to be in there and want to make big pitches in big situations. You'll throw any pitch in any situation.
I thought the key to the game, not just for when you pitching, I thought the key to the game was after you guys scored 3 in the first, they came back with 1, and you got Brantley in the big double play. Now, Brantley, we know Michael Brantley from playing against him. He's one of the best hitters in baseball, man. He puts the ball in play. He hits it all over the field. I thought that was a key to the game. Walk us through that at bat.
Yeah, 1 out, Brantley, I know he owns me, but you got to always, in that situation, believe that you're going to get him out. I thought if I go out there and execute my pitches, I could get him out. Fortunately, was able to get a first pitch ground ball double play. So, to keep it at 1 keeps the momentum on our side. And I thought, like you said, that was a big moment in the game, but to stay within myself and execute, that was also a big spot too.
That was huge.
I think you're being paged.
Say it loud.
Yeah.
Dada.
Yeah, Dada.
Max, last one for me. Going back to spring training, in your wildest dreams, when you're lining up with the Mets in Port St. Lucie, did you think that you end up here going to the World Series for Bruce Bochy and this Texas Ranger team?
I know. You would never draw it up like this, but I don't know. We're back in the World Series, and that's all that matters.
That's Max Scherzer, and most of his family, his wife and the baby, were home, but he celebrated with them with the Fox crew. And again, it'll be interesting to see how Bruce Bochy uses him in the World Series, either against Philadelphia or Arizona, depending on what happens tonight. All right, on to the Commanders and the Ron Rivera Monday news conference. I thought this was the most intense of the year. Not that he got angry or anything, but you could tell he was seething below the surface. So the first question was about how they're running their offense, which is a pass-happy offense for a quarterback who gets sacked all the time. 40 sacks for Sam Howell through 7 games, well on his way to breaking the all-time record. I know he doesn't want to throw Eric Bieniemy under the bus, but it doesn't seem like this is the best way to run this offense with this quarterback, but Rivera says he's okay with it.
I've been fine with what we've tried to do offensively. As far as I'm concerned, and look at some of the biggest things, again, it really is about the development of this young quarterback. There's been a lot of positives that you see coming out of some of the things that Sam has been doing. And, as far as that's concerned, like you see his decision-making has been really good in terms of, where he's, who he's throwing the ball to. Some things he can clean up is the type of throws that he's making. Whether he's trying to loft the ball or he needs to put the ball on the line a little bit. We saw a little bit of that yesterday, but he's been really good at it, and just really appreciate his development and growth. I think that's one of the big important things for us.
So the narrative has changed. In the early part of the season, it was developing Sam Howell and winning games, and they could go hand in hand. Now, when asked about his offense and where they are at 3 and 4, oh no, we should all feel good because we're watching this quarterback develop. Well, really? I mean, he wasn't great on Sunday, and he got sacked 5 times in the first half by a team that had 5 sacks all year. So, yeah, maybe you're seeing some development on film, but I don't think any of the fan base is getting excited about that. I think much more of the fan base is about what Jonathan Allen was saying on Sunday, and this was Allen censored as to what he said to J.P. Finley about frustration.
Does it get frustrating when that?
Yes, it does. I'm f***ing tired of this. Tired of this. Been 7 years of the same. Tired of this.
What can you do now going forward to get it turned around?
Get our minds right and get ready to play Philadelphia.
Now, he's not a malcontent. He's a leader, and you wouldn't expect something like that out of him. But I think it really is a canary in the coal mine as to what's going on here. Now, Rivera trying to smooth this out. Asked about the Allen outburst yesterday.
Yeah, he's disappointed, as is everybody else, and I can't dispute it just because he's a very passionate football player that wants to win. I get it. We all want to win. We're all passionate about this game. We want to win, and that's the bottom line. And frustration sometimes gets the best of us, and we've got to be able to handle that as well. Trust me, I get frustrated when I get up in front of you guys and I listen to some of the questions, and I want to be able to say some of the things that I really wish I could, but I can't. And that's what Jonathan felt. So, I can understand that and I can appreciate that. So, got nothing but respect for how hard the young man plays and what the young man is trying to do, and that's win football games.
Yeah, and he hasn't won a lot of them since he's come from Alabama, where they almost never lost football games. And I don't know whether he felt like this year was going to be significantly different from other years, having been here for 7 years, but it's not. And once again, this team is below 500, as we haven't even closed out October at 3-4. And Rivera was hit with the question yesterday, why is this year's 3-4 any better looking than last year's 3-4?
It does, because again, with the young quarterback, Sam, I really think there's hope. There's an opportunity. I mean, the young man has given us opportunities to win some of these games that a lot of people I know felt we couldn't. But at the same time, we've been in a lot of games. We were in the Philadelphia game. We were in yesterday's game at the end. We had a chance to win. We did. And who knows? A couple things go our way in those two games, and we got a completely different conversation going. But that's not that's the truth of the matter. That's not where we are right now, and I get that. But as long as we have that young quarterback, and he's growing and developing, and we as a team play consistent complementary football, we have a chance. We just have to be accountable for what's happened right now and step up, develop, grow, and recognize our mistakes and correct those things. And that's on me. It starts with me, and I get that. Believe me, I've been doing this for a long time, and I'll continue to do it as best as I can.
So do you see, your growth, the team's growth, totally up to Sam, or are there other adjustments or tweaks or changes that you can make, and what, if anything, are those things?
Absolutely. There's a bunch of things that need to go right for things to be even better, and a lot of them have gone right. There's a lot of things that are in place, but there's a few other things that have to come into place, and those are things that we're working on and we're going to correct and we're going to work on and get better at. But to come together and be a good football team, you've got to have a lot of things go right, and we've had several of them step into place, but we're not there yet, and we're going to continue to work, and hopefully we'll get there very soon.
With you, because very soon is the end of the season, relatively speaking. That's 10 games to go. The season ends the first week in January, and we're almost in November. So, again, the narrative has changed from we're trying to win, we believe we're developing a quarterback while we do this, to now, well, everybody should be excited because look at how well this quarterback is developing. Well, I'm not that much of a trained eye on football to be able to see that. Coming up, Kirk Cousins comes out of the wilderness last night with a win over the San Francisco 49ers. We'll look at that and more from Ron Rivera on where the Commanders are at 3-4 as he pushes the narrative, hey, we should all be excited because they're developing a quarterback. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We're in for Tony today, so roll until noon. Much more on the World Series as we wait to see who goes from the National League tonight, whether it's going to be Arizona or Philadelphia. And we'll talk about what's coming from the other side, including Max Scherzer, who got back out on the mound last night. And the team of my youth, the Washington Senators, 62 years, no World Series. Yeah, I'm kind of rooting for him to win. And, I do have some feelings for Philadelphia just because of all the ex-Nats there. I kind of like that. And I had, kind of mixed emotions. I'm glad Houston's not in again. Tired of them, those cheaters. But I really like Dusty Baker. And the Athletic is reporting that Dusty is strongly considering retirement. He's 74 years old. And I think in his mind and maybe in the minds of most people that he's now cemented his place in the Hall of Fame as a manager, that he has his World Series, which he won last year. His career record, 2,183 wins, 1,862 losses, 57 playoff wins, which is the fourth most of all time. He could still change his mind, according to the report, but, at 74, maybe it's time. He'd like to stay in baseball, apparently, in some type of capacity. Good man, really liked him as a manager. Everybody who covered him loved Dusty, liked to see him win the championship last year. I think that's a nice thing. And he should go in the Hall of Fame as the first African-American manager to make it. Now, Frank Robinson is in the Hall of Fame, but as a player, Frank Robinson was the first African-American manager when he took the Cleveland Indians job in 1974, 75, forget which year. And was a good manager, had some successful teams over the years. But Dusty Baker has been at it for a long, long time. He was a close friend of Hank Aaron, who was so important in the way baseball evolved, the all-time clean home run hitter in my mind. And too bad that Hank Aaron is no longer with us, because I think he would get a great thrill out of seeing Dusty Baker in the Baseball Hall of Fame. All right, let's get to some football here. Last night, the Vikings won. They beat the San Francisco 49ers 22-17. And yesterday, we were talking about still the possibility that the Vikings would trade Kirk Cousins before the deadline. And I thought Atlanta still might be a possibility. I thought that just, even though they won last week, that, they're leading their division with a 4-3 record, and a quarterback like that might put them over the top. They might actually be a team that could be a serious contender in the NFC, depending on how it plays out. Well, that's not going to happen now. And Kirk Cousins was very good last night. He was 35 of 45 for 378 yards. He threw 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, had a quarterback rating of 107.2, and he was not sacked. Okay? So all of you people, and I got into it on Twitter with some of you, yes, the offensive line for Washington was abysmal on Sunday, but all those sacks are not completely on the offensive line. There is a component of the quarterback getting rid of the ball, and this quarterback doesn't get rid of the ball. Kirk Cousins threw 45 passes last night. He was not sacked. That's a really good defensive line for the 49ers. 49ers make their bones on defense, and he was not sacked. So there's something to getting rid of the football. For all you people who say I'm an idiot and don't know anything, and it was the offensive line, he just didn't have time to throw. Well, there's more to it than that in the NFL. And yes, when the offensive line stinks, your quarterback gets sacked. But he doesn't get sacked as often as Kirk Cousins does, as Sam Howell does. It doesn't happen as often. This is Cousins last night after the game with Lisa Salters after their 22-17 win over San Francisco.
We found a way. This league's tough. We're one play here, one play there. We've had some tough losses. Last year we were fortunate enough to pull them out. We found a way tonight. We got to keep stacking them.
And you did it without Justin Jefferson. I mean, you threw for the most that anybody has thrown against the 49ers. How were you able to do that?
One play at a time. I don't know. That's a really good defense. Felt their rush all night. They play hard. They play fast. Without Justin at times, you feel it, not having him. But KJ stepped up. Jordan stepped up. Kevin did a phenomenal job calling the game. And it was a good plan, and we made enough plays.
I asked you before the game about going up one of the best defenses in the league, and you said we got to block them.
Yeah.
What are you going to say to your line when you get in the locker room?
Lisa, you told me before we hopped on this interview that there were 0 sacks. So that says a lot, because that is a great rush. So to have 0 sacks, and we threw it almost 50 times. Really good job by our offensive line to hold up the way they did.
Yeah. I mean, the offensive line for Minnesota is better than Washington. But, again, 45 passes, no sacks. Quarterback has something to do with that. Also, while they were doing the interview, one of the teammates on the Vikings hung a top 10 medallion around his neck. And you might make the case that Kirk Cousins is a top 10 quarterback. Has he won a lot? No. He's won 1 playoff game. But would I like to still have him here? How things would have been different without, Dan Snyder and the mishigas that was going on with Bruce Allen when he was trying to publicly embarrass him and offered him a lowball contract and kept calling him Kirk, all that nonsense that went on, and then they let him go to bring in Alex Smith. Alex Smith was good, but unfortunately broke his leg, and Kirk, for whatever shortcomings he may have, and no matter how many crushing interceptions he throws, he's out there. He plays. He plays in every game. I think he missed 1 because of COVID, but I don't think in his entire career he's missed a game because of injury. A really remarkable run there. This was after the game. Also, Scott Van Pelt with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on what they saw here and maybe kind of a redemption for Kirk Cousins and his team, which is now, not very good, 2-5, but maybe back in the mix here.
Troy, I asked you a question before this game started about how a victory for Minnesota could really change the entire trajectory of their season. But the way they got it, right? Cousins is great. The O-line doesn't give up a sack. The defense comes up with massive turnovers late. Am I nuts to say that in a bad back of the NFC that you got to take a hard look at Minnesota now and change how you see them?
Well, I think you got to look at them a little bit differently. There's no question. I mean, the way their year began wasn't very good. We know they dug themselves a big hole. They've now won 3 out of 4. Coming into this game, not a lot of people were looking at the Minnesota Vikings. This is something they can definitely build on. The key for them now is, will they be able to do that?
Understood. And listen, I'm with you. The victories they had coming in were against Chicago and Carolina, so there wasn't a whole lot to lean into. If a game like this, given what their schedule is, and you look at Minnesota, I think perhaps differently. And, Joe, as for San Francisco, I don't think we look at them differently, do we? We know they're really good, but now they've lost a couple in a row. And then, Philadelphia keeps winning, and you just don't want to put yourself in a spot where all of a sudden you're behind somebody in the NFC. How do these last couple of games frame how you see them?
Well, I think they really missed Debo tonight. It sounds like excuses, but those are big pieces to the puzzle. So I don't look at them that differently. I think we all need to be reminded that it's a small sample size of work for Brock Purdy. It's not going to be perfect. He got off to that 10-0 start. Now he's 10-2 in the regular season. He's lost back-to-back games. But, he let a couple of balls get away from him tonight. I think generally he played pretty well enough to win. They didn't win, and they're on the road. And now we'll see where they go from here. But I still think they're elite. They're a tough team to play against, and we heard Kirk Cousins talk about it after the game. No sacks. He felt their rush all night, and it took a pretty darn good effort all the way around for the Vikings to win here at home.
Yeah, and I messed up. I said that the Vikings were 2-5. They're 3-4. And, Detroit, they looked really bad on Sunday. Now, maybe that was just a bad game for them, but they got clobbered by the Ravens. It's they talk about this league, and my buddy Zabe has this saying, it's a kaleidoscope league. The way it looks one week isn't necessarily the way it looks the following week. And here we are at the 7-game mark of the season. We're not even halfway through it. And the two teams that have the best record are the Super Bowl teams, Philadelphia and Kansas City. And if you had to make a bet today, you'd say those are probably going to be the teams rematching in the Super Bowl. But a lot can happen, and you got Jalen Hurts, who's apparently playing on a bad knee. I don't know how serious it is, but he's not physically 100%. And we've seen, although Kansas City is 6-1, they've struggled a little bit. They don't look like the same old Chiefs. And same thing with the Philadelphia Eagles and teams that we left for dead, like Minnesota at 3-4. Now, yes, they're 2 games behind Detroit, but there's plenty of time to make that up. San Francisco, which looked like a lock to be in the NFC Championship game again, and maybe they're going to get there, but they look to be maybe a notch below Philadelphia right now, and it's not even the same Philadelphia from last year. Miami, with that incredible offense, well, they got brought back to earth the other night by Philadelphia. They're now 5-2 on the year. Leading the South, Jacksonville, they'll probably win the division. That division is abysmally bad with Houston, Indianapolis, and Tennessee. So they're going to win that, and they've got their quarterback finally. Baltimore, maybe this is the breakout game for them, but at 5-2, it looked like the Todd Monken offense was a little slow to take hold. Now, they certainly didn't look that way rolling up 38 points this past weekend on what was supposed to be a great Detroit defense. So maybe they're going to separate themselves out a little bit. Cleveland going through some struggles now. They're 4-2 on the year, maybe still in the mix. You never count out Pittsburgh, and they're 4-2 as well. And Cincinnati, which a lot of people thought would make the Super Bowl this year, maybe still can at 3-3 in last place. And out west, besides Kansas City, it looks like the dregs of the league. I mean, Denver's bad. Vegas is bad, even though they're 3-4. And with Justin Herbert, you would think that the Chargers would be better than 2-4, but at 2-4, they're not out of it. So the NFL draws so much attention, and the talk shows know, the TV talk shows know that the ratings are going to come from talking about TV. Even though you had the wild card series on ESPN, they ignored them. They completely ignored them. They were only about the NFL, and that's why Andrew Marchand is reporting in the New York Post that ESPN may opt out of its baseball deal because they have the right to do that in the contract. And the fact that so few people are watching, you're talking about, these are numbers for playoff series. 2.2 million people for the wild card series across the 8 games. True, they were all sweeps, but when you're paying $550 million a season and $100 million of that for the playoffs, ESPN can find a better way to spend its money. And the home run derby averaging 6 million viewers. And, even when you get to the World Series, you're talking below 10 million. So, and they don't have the World Series. That's on Fox. More from the NFL. This is Ron Rivera yesterday, has his usual Monday news conference where he talks about what he saw on tape and more follow-up from the game. He shifted the narrative yesterday. And in past weeks where he's saying, well, we can develop a quarterback while we're trying to win games. We're trying to do both. What I've seen from Sam Howell, yes, he's shown some flashes. He's shown that he could ultimately be a good quarterback, but there's a lot wrong now that's got to be fixed. If this was a team that was truly looking to be a playoff team, they might have a better chance with Jacoby Brissett for this year, not for the long term. And I think that's what may have been related to the Jonathan Allen outburst after the game on Sunday where he dropped all those F-bombs talking to J.P. Finley. I think he's looking at, 7 years now. And now I'm supposed to go through this for a quarterback who we're developing for maybe 2 or 3 years down the road? Remember when Jonathan Allen came here 7 years ago? He dropped to number 17 in the draft. I think they traded down to get that pick. And he had been projected as a higher draft pick, but there was concern about his shoulders. He'd had bad shoulders while playing at Alabama, maybe had a surgery or two. And they said, the way these guys are worked at Alabama, they come into the league, they don't have a lot left. So, if you get 5 years out of them, that might be what you get. And they took him. His first year, he got hurt, as a matter of fact. I think played only 5 games, but has been durable ever since and has been one of the leaders of this team and has one of the top contracts. But I think he's also getting the message here from the coach and the coaching staff is, it's all about developing this quarterback. Now, I don't think Ron Rivera has any belief that he's going to stay here. I don't think that's but maybe he in his mind he's saying to himself, hey, when I sit down with ownership at the end of the year, I may say to them, hey, I know our record was under 500 again, and I know I'm an under 500 coach for my career. And aside from the year that I got the Carolina Panthers to the Super Bowl with Cam Newton as the MVP, I've been a below 500 coach. I'm not very good. He's not going to say all that. What he'll say is, oh, have you seen the progress of our quarterback? And next year, you bring me back and you give me an extension, because that's what it's going to take. No way he's coming back as a lame duck coach next year. We're going to take that next step up, and we're going to compete for the Super Bowl. Maybe that's what he's selling. It sounds pretty weak when he talks to reporters about it, but that's what he's pushing. And he's also giving us, and the offensive line, depending on what, next-gen stats you look at, whatever it is, the eye test tells you they stink. This is Rivera on the rosy side of where the offensive line is right now.
That's a work in progress, and those are things that we are working to correct, and we'll continue to do that. Again, being able to plug and play is we changed the system. We went from one style of offense to another style, and there's growing pains. There really are. Trust me, and it's one of the things that I went back and looked at, and that was what first-year starters had to deal with as quarterbacks, and it's interesting, and that's something that. If you go back and you look at what history tells you, it does tell you things gets better.
Well, will it get better? And how soon will it get better? Will it get better to get this team back into the playoff mix? No, I don't think so. But he's telling you it's going to get better. This was about as defiant as I've heard him in a long time. And this was the question Scott Abraham asked him, why he thinks things will get better, and what can he tell the fan base about why he thinks they will be a better team.
I think we have found a young quarterback that gives us an opportunity. You know, we were in that game yesterday who had every chance to win, and unfortunately we didn't do it. And I understand our fans' frustration. Hell, I hear it too. Okay, and I respect them. We're trying to play the best football we can, and at the same time grow a football team. You know, we're not going to go around cutting a bunch of people, trading for a whole bunch of people, trying to hire a whole bunch of people. We're trying to develop a young football team to be a very good football team for the future, and that's what we're going to continue to work on. We're going to continue to find ways to win football games, and we'll do the best we can. We'll show up, we'll work very hard, we'll do everything we can, and we'll continue to be committed to try and put a good product on the football field and give our fans something to cheer about. But we understand their frustration, believe me, because there's a lot of us that are frustrated here because we're working our butts off.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's talk of a coach who's, on his way out the door, and, we're trying as hard as we can. I know the fans' frustration, blah, blah, blah. I would think that if this were a couple of years deeper into the ownership with Josh Harris, that they might fire him, maybe, depending on what happens against Philadelphia. If they win, the narrative changes. But realistically, they're going to lose this game. They're 6.5-point underdogs against a team that has the best record in the NFC and tied for the best record in the NFL, and has pretty much had their way with them. They did play them, close. They've been hanging their hat on that for a while, that they took Philadelphia to overtime. But the reality is they're not in the same league with them. So there's that. And then this is something that Michael Phillips wrote in the Washington Times today. You might keep your eye on what happens at the trade deadline. If they were to trade Chase Young, that might be an indication that there is going to be meddling from the ownership, or maybe there is now, because there's no gain for Rivera for getting rid of a guy who's playing really well right now. He's according to the ESPN stats, analytics, he's been one of the most effective pass rushers in the NFL over the past month. He has 5 sacks, on pace to go past the 7.5 that he got as a rookie when he was Defensive Rookie of the Year, and also you're getting good play out of Montez Sweat. If you were to trade one or the other, that would indicate that they've thrown in the towel for this year and they're looking to next year, and there's no gain for Rivera to do that. But you still have time, and the Philadelphia game could change the way people think about that. And, would they try and get like a third-round pick? Because that's really all you're going to get. And would you settle for a third-round pick for a guy in Young, who was the number 2 pick at the draft? I'd kind of forgotten about this, and Phillips brings this up. I think it's a good point, that they still have the ability, even though they didn't give him a contract extension, Chase Young, they still have the ability to franchise him. And if he plays this well over the last 10 games, that might be something that you think about, because then you stretch it out another year just to see if he's truly over his injury situation. Now, he went out with a knee injury that seemingly in most cases it was the middle of 2 seasons ago that he would have been back for the start of the season. He didn't get back until the third to last game. And then he had a stinger in the first preseason game. A stinger, sometimes you come back and play the same game. He missed, I think, 5 weeks because of that, including the opener. So if he's truly past that, if he stays healthy over the last 10, you might think about franchising him, given that you invested the number 2 pick in the draft in him. On the other hand, it's probably going to be another coach who's going to make that decision, and he did not invest in Chase Young. So all kinds of things in play here, and this is a drill that we're all familiar with here in Washington, how the end of a dead season walking plays out, and we'll continue to chronicle that as the season goes on. Coming up, we'll get to some college football. Lauren Druhan will join us on that. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. And if you've been following the arc of this fine radio show, you know that for about a year and a half, our producer was Lauren Druhan, big college football fan, grew up in the South, loves Auburn, and is now living in Los Angeles, has popped around the country because of her husband's job, and actually loving life, as we've talked the last few weeks, in Los Angeles, but kind of out of the center of the college football universe, which is where she grew up in the South, SEC country. But as we've talked about, Lauren, USC football is a big deal there, a bigger deal than the Rams, who won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, totally. People here will root for the Rams. I'm at USC, but it is definitely a bigger deal than pro. I think, like I've mentioned many times before, I think they just have too many pro teams to choose from here, and they have other things that they like to worry about. So I guess they just like to rally behind USC.
Yeah, well, the history of that goes back a long ways too, and that they played in the historic Coliseum and all the things that go along with the tradition and the national championships. But they're kind of in the eye of the storm now. The hype that they got with Caleb Williams going into the year, that they were going to this year win the national championship, and Williams was going to repeat as the Heisman Trophy winner and be the #1 draft pick. Well, they've hit bumps in the road. Now they've lost 2 games. And the talk now is that they shut Caleb Williams down for the year since he can't win the Heisman and can't win the national championship. How realistic do you think that is?
I'm not exactly sure how realistic that is. I do know, obviously he's out of the Heisman race. He's probably going to start preparing for the draft. Is it possible? Yeah, I think so. Keep your guys healthy. A lot of teams are seeing that right now. Will Rogers is out for Mississippi State. Will he play this week against Auburn? Who really knows? But I don't know. I think it is realistic, but I wouldn't count him out yet.
Okay, and if your team was in a similar situation, unfortunately, Auburn, rough year, kind of same record as the Commanders.
Yeah.
But if, I mean, how would you feel? I mean, would you because you were into it, you like to watch every game. When you have the opportunity, you go, you tailgate, you make a whole big day of it. If your quarterback checked out on a team that couldn't win the national championship, how would you feel about it?
I don't love it. It kind of goes with the tanking in the NFL so they can get better draft picks, right? Except that doesn't happen in college football. So it is disappointing. It kind of goes along with, the bowl games, and it's like, okay, which players are going to opt out? I kind of understand it with bowl season solely because it does come so close to the draft. But right now in the season, week 9 coming up, I don't like the move,
Yeah, I don't think it's it's not the college football we grew up with, but it's also maybe the modern reality, because this season was really all about the possibility that he completes his resume, Caleb Williams, by winning the national championship. And now that he's won the Heisman and he's going to be the #1 pick no matter what he does. I mean, at one time, I guess it would have been frowned upon to check out for the season, but it's not now. So why not do it? The other part of this story, and we played some of what Bill Plaschke said yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. He's soured as a columnist for the LA Times on Lincoln Riley. What's the sense you get being out there among USC fans about how they feel about him?
I think they still like him. I think, give him some time. It hasn't been too long. I know nowadays in college football you can flip a team, almost immediately. But I think they still like him. I personally still think, he's going to do really well at USC. So give him some time. I think he's going to be all right there.
Okay. Well, see, that's not the typical college football fan's outlook.
No.
As you know, when you lose a big game in the South, they put a for sale sign in front of your house.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So,
that's so true. That's so true. And especially nowadays with the transfer portal and NIL, it is really easy to flip. I can't say that I haven't said that about Hugh Freeze in
already?
the last couple weeks.
Are you already going in that direction? I mean, he's only been on the job for 7 games. And you met him.
No.
Yeah.
I'm not. I did meet him. He's really nice. No, it's all overreaction as a fan. In the moment, heat of the moment, you're like, fire the guy.
Yeah.
It's definitely all overreactions. I think once you take a step back and look at it, let them breathe a little bit, give them some time. It'll be fine. Next year, if we're in similar situations with USC, I can definitely see his head being on the chopping block. But right now, I think we're all right.
Okay. We're talking to Lauren Druhan, big college football fan, as we talked about, big Auburn fan. And you're so young, I probably have asked you about this before, but maybe I should ask you again, how much you remember about the Cam Newton season when he won the Heisman Trophy and Auburn won the national championship. Is that still fresh in your mind, or were you too young to really?
Very fresh.
Okay, good.
Very fresh. I didn't pay as much of attention like player to player and like logistics of things, but very, very fresh in my mind. Season was one of the best.
Okay, so I've got something to relate to this and see how you feel. The Michigan story, which I didn't really pay attention to, with the stealing of the signs. Initially it sounded like something minor. They had somebody scouting a practice or a game or something like that. But ESPN is now reporting that it was a very elaborate scheme cooked up by a low-level assistant who bought tickets and used extensive video equipment to record all this. And it gets to the question of, if the NCAA could ramp up the investigation fast enough, could they possibly ban Michigan from playing in the playoff if they're eligible to do it? Let's say they finish undefeated and win the Big Ten championship and would be automatic. Could they be kept out of it? Now, as you remember, Cam Newton's year, there was a story about his father accepting lots of money from boosters, and the evidence was pretty overwhelming. Do you remember a period of time you thought, I mean, they didn't have a playoff then, but, you would declare a national champion and they would play in the national championship if they went undefeated. Did you have fears that Cam Newton was going to be popped during the season?
There were all talks, but I think it was more understood around like our area, where if a team is that good and has that big of a story, then they will find, and a college with Auburn's got money. They have power, whether they're the best in the SEC or not. So it was kind of understood that they would find a way to kind of subside it or make it go away. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there was fears at some time. And now I also think, so, I mean, social media was a thing back then, right? But it's not as big as it is now.
Right.
And I think social media is going to play more of a part in this story as opposed to the Cam Newton story. It was a little easier to, hide things from the media than it is now.
Yeah, I think probably that was part of it. And also the rules were different then, that you couldn't take money. Now you can take money. So even though this is a different level of cheating, it's because it's, so ollie oxen free on what you can, do for players, that maybe this also gets kind of buried. The other thing is, Michigan's probably going to hire a bunch of lawyers, and they'll slow walk this thing so they can get it, through the end of the season. And here's my feeling about vacated national titles. They don't mean anything to me. When I think of USC and Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and the championships that they've had to vacate, it doesn't bother me. I mean, I still think of them as national champions. Do you think of it in a way that would have an asterisk next to it?
Yeah, no, I don't. There's always going to be the questions, especially when at the top there is such a fight right now. Everyone at the top is so good right now that it could be like, well, a what if, there could be an asterisk this year, but if they are hands down far and away the best team in the nation, then no. I mean, everyone knows, if you play like Georgia the last couple years, they far and away are definitely the best team in the country. If Michigan was at that level, let's say last year or the year before, where they had to, vacate the college football playoffs, then I think everyone would be understand, like, yeah, these were the national champions, but Michigan really would have been had they played. But this year, there's so many people at the top that it's like, who knows if they would go to the playoffs and do well. You know what I'm saying? So there could be an asterisk. Just solely because they haven't totally separated themselves from the top. Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a year where there's really no great team, and having all these undefeated teams at this point in the season is really amazing, because usually you've had the head-to-head and so forth. But it is what it is. Are you as an Auburn fan, are you drawing any pleasure? And not that they did come back last week, but that this is not a typical Nick Saban season that follows another season that was not typical Nick Saban. I guess they call that Schadenfreude. Do you revel a little bit in the fact that they're not Alabama anymore? Of course, it's always fun to watch your rival struggle. You know what I mean? And not really struggle, but they have had to claw their way back into some games, and of course they do because it's Alabama. But yeah, it's a little fun to see. The Iron Bowl is always a huge, huge game every single year. And honestly, no matter what the team's rank is or the team's current standings are, it's typically always a pretty good game. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, it's always fun to see a rival struggle for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want as an Auburn fan is to see a lopsided Iron Bowl. I get that, and Nick's had his run, and maybe it's time for somebody to move over. We're talking to Lauren Druhan, and if you've been following the last few weeks that she's been on, the domestic situation is her husband has to travel for work, so he's been out of town and was out of town for the LSU Auburn game. He's an LSU fan. Lauren, of course, an Auburn fan. So has he returned from his journey? Question number one. Is he back in town?
He is back. He got back yesterday. He's back, yeah.
Has there been any discussion of that game, or is it completely in the past?
Not one word has been spoken.
No, okay. and if he were to say, hey, while I was at it, would you stop him in mid-sentence, or would you allow him to revel just a little bit in beating your team?
I think it's that Auburn is just so bad that there's really nothing to really revel about, especially when you have Jaden Daniels as your quarterback who's in the Heisman talks. You know, I mean, he's a really, really great quarterback. So it kind of makes you feel a little better that you got beat that bad by a Heisman candidate. If we played LSU like we played Ole Miss, then that would warrant some talk. That would be a more contentious conversation about the game. But with them beating us so badly, and they're far better than we are this year, it's just kind of like, it is what it is. We'll see it. We'll see you next year.
It's a lot more tense if they're both good. I get that. Now,
exactly, yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've had this discussion, and yes, Jaden Daniels is a Heisman Trophy candidate, but when you're rolling it up on Army 62-0, I mean, come on! Do you really have to do that? Was it really necessary to pad your stats that bad? What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I think when you're in the SEC and you are ranked number 15, and you do have a guy like Jaden Daniels, and your defense hasn't really been all that great all year, it's kind of like you have a little. You need to make that stat big because it is Army, and you do need to be like, oh, well, they did beat Army 62-0. The defense needed something to speak for. I think they needed it to be that big of a blowout because nowadays, if you're just looking at a score and let's say they beat them, 35-0, is it as impressive as 62? No, but they're not. I think it's all right. I think it's all right.
Okay, you're a forgiving wife. Then that's okay. I'm sure he greatly appreciates. You probably say, honey, if you want to roll it up on Army, just go ahead, right?
Just do it. Yeah, if it makes y'all feel better, just do it. Do it while you can.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, and I think we were probably talking about this when we were doing the show. The hype over Arch Manning going to Texas, and he does go there. And I thought, boy, as soon as Ewers stubs his toe, that's it. The Manning era begins. Well, Ewers is going to be out for a few weeks with a shoulder injury, and Arch is the third string quarterback. Are you wondering, like I am, if maybe he was completely overhyped and may not be that good? What do you think?
I don't know. It very well could be, and I kind of always thought that solely because of the name. That's really hard. Look at, LeBron James' kid is probably going to have to deal with the same thing going into the NBA draft. It's really hard to follow up a name with not only your dad that's so famous, but your uncle, the whole family, your grandfather, like the whole family is just such a big deal that I think it's kind of hard, and maybe they're giving him some time. Maybe he is, just as good, but I think they might just want to give him some time to just be a kid, before they put him out in the spotlight. Because once he's out there, right. And as a 18-year-old, that's hard.
True, and he's also, as far as security and everything, he's making over $3 million reportedly from NIL. I wonder how those people feel about paying him all that money to sit on the bench. But on the other hand, I guess in the long term, and you can do this if you're the Mannings, look at the long game, that he can wait a year. And I guess Ewers will probably be in the pros next year, and maybe he gets the job. But, after all the hype, because, right, whose name had we heard more than any other high school quarterback in the last 4 years? Arch Manning.
Yeah, no, it's definitely Arch. But also, Andy, Texas is coming into the SEC. Maybe they're waiting on a big splash. If we look back at Texas A&M, the year that they entered the SEC, Johnny Manziel was their quarterback. And look at how big that blew up, not only Johnny, but the SEC. Like Texas A&M came in hot. So I'm wondering if maybe that has a little something to do with it. Maybe he'll go in once they enter the SEC. Who knows?
That's a great point. And also, you would have the kind of Mount Rushmore of the SEC with the two Ole Miss, the father and Eli, and then Peyton at Tennessee, and now Texas. But boy, when I think SEC football, having spent 6 years living in Texas, I'm sure as hell not thinking about Austin, Texas. And I know you're not either, as a longtime Auburn fan. Yeah, but that's college football these days, I guess. Yeah.
Yep, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Good to talk to you, and we'll catch up with the latest next week. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks, Andy.
Take care. That's Lauren Druhan in Los Angeles now, a displaced SEC fan, and watching what's unfolding with USC. And the shutdown 10 years ago, if they were said, oh, well, he's not going to win the Heisman, he's not going to win the national championship, we're shutting him down, this would be a outrage, incredible outrage. The fact that it's probably going to happen and nobody's going to bat an eye and nobody's going to care what it means for his draft status. Like a lot of the old timers would have said, if he's shutting down, he's quitting on his team, he's going to quit on his team in the NFL. It doesn't work that way anymore. Too much money on the line.